Why do Sonic fans hate platforming? Is a weird sentence when you think about it. Sonic fans hate platforming? Isn't the franchise a platformer? Isn't every mainline Sonic game considered a platformer? Well, yes. By definition, each of these games are platformers. But there's a little more to it than that. There's nuance to the subject. Certain games in the series offer more platforming than others, to put it simply. I think the easiest example to start us with, right off the bat, is comparing a game like Sonic 1 to Sonic Forces. Sonic 1 goes heavy in the platformer department with stages like, say, Marble Zone taking a backseat on the thrills and constant speed in favor of a more traditional platforming experience. Sonic Forces, on the contrary, while its main genre is platformer, easily features the least amount of platforming in the entire series, as the platforming that resides in it is the bare bones required for it to be considered a platformer. Basic jumps throughout its entire runtime without any real challenge or interesting level design to keep it interesting throughout. So that's what I say when I mean one game can be more or less of a platformer than another, despite its defining genre being platformer. Why don't Sonic fans like platforming? It's a very broad question / statement, which probably needs some clarification. Not all Sonic fans hate platforming or anything. This video might not apply to you. You might agree with everything I say, or you might disagree with everything I say. This entire video is just based on observations I've seen throughout the fandom that I have a lot to say about. Also, for the most part, I see merits in more straightforward Sonic games, so while I will be criticizing them, I'm not writing them off completely or saying you aren't allowed to enjoy them, or even saying that I don't enjoy them. Real quick, if you do enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe as I'm trying to hit 10k subscribers by the end of the year. And you can also support my Patreon to get early access for videos if you want to go the extra mile. Alright, let's start. My main observation, or whatever, for this video is that a lot of Sonic fans enjoy more simple and straightforward experiences that require less platforming than usual. This is seen most of the time when comparing a lot of average opinions on the franchise. People love games like Sonic 2, Adventure 1 and 2, and Boost titles for the most part, while usually disliking other games such as Sonic 1, CD, and Colors. It's a very easy contrast to see when it's laid out. The first batch of games I mentioned lack in the platforming department, being more so focused on intense speed and quick thrills with less substance and actual stuff going on, whereas the other batch of games I mentioned are very plentiful with their platforming, often demanding more of the player and requiring a higher level of engagement to get the most amount of enjoyment out of them. Why is this though? Why do people seem to prefer when a game has less platforming? I feel like the opposite is usually the case for other fandoms, where typically the less platforming a platformer has, the worse it is. So why is that so different for Sonic? Well, it all started off with a concept I felt became mishandled very early on in the series: speed. The concept of speed in the series carries a lot more nuance than I believe a lot of people think. Sonic 1 is a comparatively slow game when put side by side with Sonic 2. There's a lot more methodical and thoughtful platforming at play that tends to prevent you from going super fast a lot of the time, whereas just looking at Sonic 2 gameplay, half of the time you're speeding through these zones at lightning fast speeds. Now, without even dissecting the gameplay of either, which one sounds cooler? For most people, it's that second one. You're telling me I get to go fast all the time? That sounds pretty fucking cool. I imagine this was a result of a lot of kids struggling with Sonic 1 and trying to course correct by making all the high speed you saw in the commercials more obtainable. And while the high speed thrills of Sonic 2 can be exhilarating, I find that an overcorrection was made. The whole premise of Sonic's speed wasn't that anybody could achieve it constantly, it was that they couldn't. Speed, for the most part, wasn't a promise. It was a reward for high-level play. Not that maintaining a flow state in games like Sonic 2 doesn't exist, but with the way the level design in this game works, is even in the slowest stages, there will be plenty of easy opportunities to get, at the very least, some short bursts of speed. Now, Sonic 1 had speed sections, sure, but they were very few and far between and served as a great break in the action when they occurred. In Sonic 2, they designed the speed sections more like it is the action. You'll do one jump and then, alright, it's time to kick it back into high gear. I'm being rewarded for doing the bare minimum. The speed I gain feels way less rewarding because, well, I didn't really do anything. I think the stage I feel this the most with is Chemical Plant. As time moves on, I realize that I do not really like this stage. It is a painfully simple stage where over half of its runtime consists of rolling down slopes really fast, doing the most basic platforming for 5 seconds, and then rolling down another hill. I don't like this, but a lot of people do. Why? Because it's cool, it's fun, it's like a roller coaster. Just, it feels like a roller coaster without any of the build-up. But for most people, that doesn't really matter. Which game looks more interesting just off of first glance? Even I could admit, it's clearly Sonic 2. I mean, Marble Zone just looks so slow and boring in comparison to this. But a glance doesn't really do a stage like Marble justice. Marble is the one with more substance. It's got more actual gameplay where the player is playing the game, but on the surface, Sonic 2 just looks way cooler. I think a lot of it has to do with first impressions. I imagine most Sonic fans started with a game like Sonic 2, and I'll tell you what, that game has an amazing first impression. On a first playthrough, those speed sections are really riveting. They stick in your mind. The first playthrough of Sonic 1 doesn't usually try wowing the player, meaning the only thing that might stick in a player's mind after a first playthrough is Green Hill was fun, and wow, Marble Zone was really hard and annoying. So naturally, after this realization, I feel most people will largely write off Sonic 1 and instead replay Sonic 2 over and over. And if they ever do go back to Sonic 1, well, they play it like Sonic 2, which only leads to disaster. Sonic 2 has a very, if you hold forward and brute force the levels, you could eventually beat them sort of mentality. Whereas something like Sonic 1, if you try to brute force it, you will be punished because you're supposed to actually engage with the game and do some platforming. Sonic 2 set a negative precedent in this regard, as most Sonic games following would adapt the same philosophy of, if you hold forward and jump, you can make substantial progress. And I feel all this did was end up holding the games back from being as engaging as they could have. This makes for games that, while stick in your mind and have great first impressions, offer way less in terms of substance and actual platforming. I often feel the Sonic games with the best first impressions are the one that kind of end up being the worst in terms of replayability. Sure, Sonic 2 and Shadow Gens are pretty good games, but I find myself largely going through the motions when I replay them, whereas a playthrough of Sonic 1, CD, Colors, etc., I feel there's always something to improve on and be better at. Sonic 2 and the precedent it set led to Sonic games being seen as games that you could simply hold forward and jump to beat, and so that's the mindset many people adapt when playing Sonic games. Because of this, naturally people get upset when that's not the case. People tend to like certain Sonic games less when they actually ask the player to engage with the level design in any meaningful way. Sonic Colors, when it's brought into a negative light, is often regarded as a slow, 2D section-ridden, generic platformer. Now, if you've actually attempted to improve at the game, you'd know this sentiment is a complete lie. The problem? Most of the enjoyment from the game comes from engaging with it properly and treating it like an actual platformer, which a lot of people, to put it simply, do not. When any game like Colors deviates from the status quo, people don't try to adapt. If you play Sonic Colors like Sonic Generations, that's your problem. Just like how if you're playing Sonic CD like Sonic 2, that's also your problem. I think the big reason that the series has this issue is because, well, Sonic Team enforces it. Sonic 2 set a precedent that's still felt today, of games meant to be easily beaten by everyone while not having to do much in terms of actual engaging with the level or platforming. In fact, one reason everyone acts so confused and annoyed when they're presented with platforming is because Sonic Team has conditioned everyone into thinking their platforming should be done for them. The biggest culprit for this is the homing attack, or action chains in general. Before, what would have been some simple jumps up a rock formation or what have you, is now all done for you via the inclusion of the homing attack. And while certain games reward you for trying to ignore the automation, whether intentionally or not, like Sonic Adventure or Sonic Colors, that option has been slowly whittled down into the reverse. Now, it's usually faster just to do the homing chain. If the most optimal thing to do in that very moment is mash the homing attack, I think that's a problem. In Shadow Generations, without using exploits, you'll find it very hard to skip homing chains via platforming because usually, you can't. The most you can do most of the time is air boost to skip a single enemy. Sonic Team has conditioned everyone to not worry ever about platforming, so when the rare section of pure platforming is brought in, people tend to dislike it. And when you do have to platform, it's often very basic and focused more on reaction times over proper platforming. Not that this reaction-based approach isn't fun, but I certainly don't think it's ideal. With most boost games, rarely are you ever given a chance to experiment with the physics Sonic has. Because what's the point of things like slope jumps where the height depends on your speed in a game where you always go at max speed? This is one reason I actually appreciate Colors and how it properly treats the boost like a limited resource, giving you room to play at a slower speed and experiment with Sonic's natural physics. This leads to fun moments reminiscent of the classics like jumping halfway through a quarter pipe to gain extra height, which is completely absent from other boost games like Gens and Unleashed. There's more variables when it comes to Sonic in Colors because of the lessened importance of the boost, which leads to more experimentation and thoughtful platforming. Other boost games don't have this opportunity very often because very rarely are you left without a full boost meter. So, why do a lot of Sonic fans hate platforming? Because Sonic Team conditions them to expect a constant leisurely experience where your speed is either at 0 or 100. And when variables are added, and when things aren't as binary, players don't adapt or aren't even aware they need to adapt. With all this said, I still like games that don't have a shit ton of platforming. Sonic 2 can be fun, and Sonic Gens is flat out one of my favorite games, but my sentiment still stands. More intricate platforming where you're rewarded for your knowledge of Sonic's physics and controls will always be more fun and satisfying to me than holding forward and watching my character go really fast. I get why a lot of people don't care for the more platformer-oriented style of Sonic, but I think if you've gotten this far into the video, you should take my words in mind and maybe revisit some of those games or levels you didn't initially like because of the platforming in them. I think there's a good chance you'll change your mind. If you made it this far, thank you, I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe, and if you want to support me even more, you can support me on Patreon for as low as $2.50. I'll see y'all next time. Peace.